Every time you fill up your tank, you're feeling the aftershock of a secret meeting that happened in 1960. 5 countries, 1 room in Baghdad. A shared fury at being cut out of profits from their own oil. That meeting created OPEC, a cartel that would eventually bring the entire Western economy to its knees. But what most people don't know is that one of its founding members would go on to spark the biggest energy crisis in modern history. Not through a war, not through an embargo, but through a revolution nobody saw coming. This is the story of how a pact between 5 oil nations in 1960 set off a chain of events we're still living with today. And how Iran, one of OPEC's founding members, lit the fuse that changed everything. To understand why OPEC exists, you have to understand how humiliating the situation was before it did. In the middle of the 20th century, the world ran on oil. But the countries sitting on top of all that oil had almost no say in what happened to it. The entire global market was controlled by a handful of Western oil companies, known as the Seven Sisters. They controlled the wells, the pipelines, the prices, everything. The producing nations got a fraction of the profits from their own ground. Then, in August 1960, the Seven Sisters did something that crossed a line. Without consulting anyone, they just cut the price of crude oil, unilaterally, which meant cutting the revenues of every producing country overnight. For Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and Iran, that was the last straw. 1 month later, in September 1960, representatives from all 5 nations met in Baghdad. Over 4 days, they hammered out a deal. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, was born. The official mission was to coordinate oil policy and ensure fair prices. The real mission was to break the Seven Sisters' stranglehold once and for all. Iran was a key player from day one. It appointed Fuad Rouhani as OPEC's very first Secretary General. At first, nobody took them seriously. But as the 1960s rolled on and the world got thirstier for oil, the balance of power started to shift. More nations joined Qatar, Libya, Indonesia, the UAE. Then, in 1968, OPEC issued a bombshell declaration asserting the permanent sovereignty of every nation over its own natural resources. The stage was set. The 70s is when OPEC stopped asking and started telling. Member countries began nationalizing their oil industries, kicking out the Western multinationals and taking back their own fields. Production quotas came in. Steep price hikes followed. For the first time in history, it wasn't boardrooms in London or New York setting the price of oil, it was the countries that actually had it. This all exploded in 1973. An oil embargo tied to the Yom Kippur War caused prices to quadruple almost overnight, sending shockwaves through every Western economy and teaching the world a lesson it hadn't learned before. Oil is a political weapon. OPEC had made its point. Money started flooding into the producing nations at a scale that was almost hard to comprehend. And right at the center of all of it was Iran. Under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran was flush with petrodollars and on a mission. The Shah launched a sweeping campaign of modernization and military expansion. Tehran's skyline was transforming. Iran's global influence was surging. He was a key US ally, and he was spending like it. But all that money was papering over some very deep cracks. The Shah's authoritarian grip, his close relationship with Washington, and the breakneck pace of social change were alienating massive parts of Iranian society. A wealthy elite was getting fabulously rich. The traditional and religious parts of the country felt left behind and disrespected. A powder keg was quietly being filled. By late 1978, Iran exploded. Massive protests, crippling strikes, the country grinding to a halt. The most devastating strikes hit the oil fields.
Today is longer than it's ever been. I have no explanation for it.
In November, 37,000 workers walked off the job. Iran's oil production collapsed from nearly 6 million barrels a day down to just 1.5 million. By January 1979, the Shah was gone. The Iranian Revolution was complete. And the country's oil industry had essentially shut down, pulling roughly 4.8 million barrels per day off the world market, about 7% of everything the planet produced. Gone. Saudi Arabia and others tried to pick up the slack. It wasn't enough. But here's the thing, the actual missing barrels weren't even the biggest problem. It was the panic. The market was already jumpy from 1,973. The second it smelled trouble in Iran, buyers started hoarding, terrified the revolution would spread, that the whole Middle East would destabilize. That speculative panic essentially doubled the impact of the real shortage. The official price of oil climbed from around $13 a barrel to $34 by mid-1980. On the spot market, where oil is bought and sold for quick delivery, traders were paying as much as $50, a second oil crisis in less than a decade, and this time, it wasn't triggered by OPEC. It was triggered by the implosion of one of its founders. It got worse. In September 1980, Iraq, sensing opportunity in Iran's chaos, invaded. 8 brutal years of war followed. Both countries started targeting each other's oil facilities and tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. Supplies were disrupted even further, but here's what actually happened next, and it's not what you'd expect. You'd think a massive war between two of the world's biggest oil producers would send prices to the moon. It didn't, because the world had finally started to adapt. The brutal price shocks of the late 70s had forced a real reckoning. In the West, smaller cars, better insulation, energy efficiency actually mattered now. Demand started to drop, and those high prices had made it profitable to drill in places that previously didn't make economic sense. Prospectors hit major new fields in the North Sea, Alaska, and the Gulf of Mexico. Non-OPEC supply was surging. By the mid-1980s, all of this created a massive glut. The scarcity of 19 to 79 flipped into oversupply by 1986, and prices crashed to around $12 a barrel. OPEC tried to cut production to stop the bleeding, but with so many member states desperate for cash, cheating on quotas was rampant. The cartel that had brought the West to its knees had lost control, a victim of its own success. The 1979 crisis didn't just cause a shock, it permanently rewired the global energy market. It kicked off the era of price volatility and geopolitical risk we still live in today. And nowhere is that more obvious right now than at the Strait of Hormuz. In 2018, the US pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions, a maximum pressure campaign designed to drive Iran's oil exports to zero. Prices spiked immediately. Not because supply was disrupted, because the market was afraid it might be. Then in January 2020, the US assassinated top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Oil prices jumped 4% in hours again, not because a single barrel stopped flowing, but because of fear. That's the recurring lesson of 1979 in oil markets. The fear of disruption can be as powerful as the disruption itself. But what's happening right now takes everything to a completely different level. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched joint military strikes on Iran, and in those strikes, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed. The man who had led Iran since 1989, the architect of decades of confrontation with the West gone, Iran's response was immediate. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. Not threatened, closed. They began attacking merchant ships, attempting to transit. By March 2nd, the IRGC formally confirmed that any vessel entering the strait would be targeted. The International Energy Agency called it the most significant supply shock in the history of the oil market. Think about what that means. About 20 million barrels of oil pass through that strait every single day, roughly 20% of the world's entire supply. Nearly $500 billion in annual energy trade. All of it suddenly at risk. Oil surged past $110 a barrel. The US began military operations to reopen the strait. Trump threatened Iran's energy grid repeatedly, pushing back deadlines. The 70 allies were pressured to send warships, most refused. Iran made over 21 confirmed attacks on merchant ships. Then, on April 7th today, as this goes out, Trump announced a 2-week suspension of planned strikes on Iran, brokered by Pakistan, on the condition that Iran reopen the strait. Iran has agreed. Safe passage is now being coordinated through Iran's armed forces. Whether this holds, whether it leads to real negotiations or just resets the clock before the next escalation, nobody knows. What we do know is this. Every fear about the Strait of Hormuz that analysts had warned about for decades just became real. The choke point didn't just get threatened, it got closed. From a secret meeting in Baghdad in 1960, OPEC succeeded in doing exactly what it set out to do, shifting control of the world's most critical resource from corporate boardrooms to sovereign nations. But the story of OPEC is also a story of consequences nobody planned. For the 1979 Iranian Revolution triggered a chain reaction that reshaped the entire energy map. It baked a permanent risk premium into every barrel traded since. It created the volatile spot market that still whipsaws prices today. And it cemented Iran's role as the ultimate wild card in global energy, a founding member of the cartel, now decades sanctioned, still holding a geographic card that no other country on earth has. the coastline of the most important three-mile stretch of water in the world. The fear that traders priced in after 1979, that a revolution could shut down the oil supply overnight, just played out again in 2026. Not with a revolution this time, with a war. Every time you fill up your tank and wince at the number, you're feeling the aftershock of decisions made in Baghdad in 1960, Tehran in 1979, and Washington in 2026. The pact created to control oil ended up creating a world that is, in so many ways, controlled by it. And that world is still being written right now, as you watch this. If you want to keep following stories like this, the forces shaping energy, geopolitics, and the global economy that most people don't fully understand, subscribe to Stag Research. This one is going to keep developing.